주비 고시 잡이 된주 되니래 딜라양 네 개발 잡이네 주 아니 최기 동시 소소 양답을 바시 고네 되네 숨기요 발레 네 당보 아니 케비 내주 딜라양 내주 나네 네 당보 풍부라 개바선 딜라양 풍부들에는 수기 풍부 네 초리 풍부 두시기 풍부 두지기 풍부 아니 넘버 쉐비 풍부 선인데 응아요 변능네 시바 두지기 풍부 선 디깔레 두지기 풍부 될라양 두제 충된단 제바당 충된 마인 바스는데 니 유변능네 충된단 제바 충된데 네 충방 나 충기고네 충기여 선에다 가상 충말에 충방 같이 네 된 왕보 충바 mikpa yul 충바 넘바 진당 충바 뒤 다다와 충바 제레레네 충바 스티데 충바 나기 고네 충기여 스티 충긴 된조 수레스는 섬중 된조 인세 조섬당 냠돌라 디다우 충바 나이 고네 충비고네 두기여 선다 되는 디다우 그 섬중 데라 에나 가초여스나 되네 섬중 갑중 가초여 이네 따와델라 양 예와체나니 심중 갑중 맹아 차기레스 디네 수미 갑델라 심중 단다 갑중 맹아 나니 군동아 친사바레 유능행아 친사바레 걔네 개샘주 죽지 친사바레 디네 잔윤투 친사네 다들은 니윤 니슈 능랄레데요.
At the beginning of class, please give rise to bodhicitta, thinking, may all sentient beings, who are as numerous as the sky is vast, attain a state that is free of suffering and the causes for suffering. And may I be able to establish all these sentient beings at the level of the highest attainment, perfect Buddhahood. And in order to be able to do so, may I now study and reflect and put the teachings correctly into practice. With that kind of motivation, please engage in your studies. The text that we're studying is Mipam Rinpoche's Gateway to Knowledge, or the treatise which is entitled The Gate for Entering the Way of a Pandita. And the text is mainly concerned with 3 different topics, so it has 3 main sections: the 10 topics of expertise, the 4 seals of Dharma, and the 4-fold correct discrimination. Out of these, we're currently discussing the 10 topics of expertise, and from within those, the first one, the aggregates. There are 5 aggregates: the aggregate of form, sensation, perception, formation, and consciousness. And currently we're discussing formations. There are 2 types of formations. There are concurrent formations and non-concurrent formations. We said that the first one is named in this way, the concurrent formations, because they're concurrent with the main mind in 5 ways, based on 5 principles in which they are concurrent with the same mind, that include having the same object, being based on the same faculty, happening at the same time, apprehending the same aspects, and being concerned with the same type of substantiality. So in that sense, they are concurrent. These formations are concurrent with the main mind, and that mainly refers to the 51 mental states. Or in this discussion of what is concurrent with the main mind, we speak about the 51 mental states. And we have covered already a number of these 51 mental states. We have already covered the 5 ever-present mental states. We have spoken about the 5 object-determining mental states. We have discussed the 11 virtuous mental states and the 6 root-disturbing emotions. And currently we're discussing now the 20 subsidiary disturbing emotions. When we were discussing view, we also said there are 5 types of view, and if we enumerate them separately, then the number of the mental states is 55, not 51.
네, 가상기 참니 말라 갸파니 네메바당 랑초 소 랑규라 예비 삭제기 분소 가양 롱와라 가시 차비 셈게 랑 마구 티바테스 티바테 징비 되노스 근데 소소 네메바도 소소 소보 탕보 요바도 로양 슌슌 요바도 디네 수보게 입 넘바 된전 야고 요와도 네 균을 빠져 된전 분순 소바도 요바도 로총 신 된데 분순 소바도 딘데 예비 깝라 랑귤 예비 삭제기 분소 된전라 가양 정말라 셈베 가신 나는 연된 디당 디다고 예 삼비고네 된저 연된 된저라 소소양 셈바 차신 안네 셈게 랑 소소소 되는 고샤 메비고네 다 틱바데 세나나다 델와도라 징바 셈 징징 지워서는 신라 고샤 메비고네 되네 신라 세나미도 데 지당 셈 고샤 메비고네 되네 랑라 연된 남비고네 되네스네 셈바데레스 다디 델와낭라 페나 마겔당 디니데라 케버델라다 마겔스나다 신라 때네 조 샤고레 숭비도 데 델와데나라 데 단다디 갸파 셰바데네데 랑라 랑기 코파나라 랑라 연된 랑기 연된데라 랑기 분순 소바는 랑셈 차스 랑라 예스네 랑셈 되네 구샤메 랑셈 톰보 소소소 되네 야고요 소소 남나 야고요 삼대와 소소소 셈 남나 소소소 야고인 삼대와 조체와 소소라 윤신체네 요 땡아절데 조체와 신라 신레장아 하바인 신럽중 연나야 콜레장아 또 럽중 야가인 신 하장 럽중 첨부에나 공조당아 더우인 라야도 봐 데데 나절 시바데 지당 신라 때네 되네 조상은 된다디 단다디 갑데 조조 소소 랑랑 톰보인 랑랑 야고요 삼네 랑랑라 셈차 랑랑라 가 랑랑라 톰보도 수연에 되 제로기 셈중 삼로딩이 민나레 순나레도 뇨몽바당 아니 자위 뇨몽바당 예비 뇨몽바된도 탐제게 시암 된다고 지그래서 디기 셈라 여송나 안에 잔연당 뇨년된도 이 시도 지그래서 순나 단 마대반에서 띠무기 차도바레스 양답이네스 되가나다 양답이네 상계출 균균이요 양답이네 바스 되네 양답이네 당세 기비출라 미메바스 기비출 류지군의 개와 나기군 용아 있음지 개위 쳐야 된다라 드니 셈 미메바스는 개와데 마제나 차와니네 디게미도 콘조스나 까 마슈나 차와니네 디게미도 스네 딘데지 삼로데 메바나브라 따티도 미메바스 콘초라야 남메 땅 담비 쳐야 지에라 남메 땅 지나데 마데바레스 디 렐로게 땐 지겨레스 레로스나 최 마인비 자와라 가능진이 도나 레로 라브레스 디민나 니 레로기 텐체보스 다 레로니 센터디 올라 레로네 냐르와 체와 냐르와 팔랑가나마 냐르와 아니 장가 된줄라 녜와 국가 된줄 간나 체와 아니 마ril네 대와 또 된줄와 대와 따위 자왕 님발라 현니 기비 초라 미터신스 아니 주파 소가르체바스 주파 고숨기 주파 고숨기 룽아 예술라 주게데라 마촌네 되네 마냐르데도 마체라 녜네 데도 마네 랑루 칸테우도 딘데 체네 준주기 메든 초스 기비 초라 되네 쿠준치니 야랑니 개위 초라 준주치네 마체네데 말헬로 치네 대샤바데 레로스 메든 초소
Okay, so if we now continue from where we have left off yesterday, we are on page 28 and there on paragraph 1.86, self-infatuation. Self-infatuation is the is to have excessive pride and vanity due to the fascination with or attachment towards any kind of conditioned prosperity possessed by oneself, such as good health or youthfulness. It forms the support for the disturbing emotions and subsidiary disturbing emotions. So, self-infatuation is referring to the extreme attachment and value that one places in one's own health, youth, looks, wealth, education. To think that one, like that, to develop pride to the fact that one has these qualities. The qualities, they are conditioned. It's they come about through conditions, and so they're not stable, but still one develops the attachment towards these qualities and is fascinated by them, really likes them, and so becomes very uh, attached to oneself and one's qualities, even though they're so conditioned. And that leads to disrespecting others or to a certain sense of haughtiness where one is just infatuated by one's own qualities, by one's own health and wealth and good looks and youth and all of that. So it is a form of pride, but the difference between now the self-infatuation and the pride or arrogance that we saw before in 1.63 is that arrogance is based on a comparison to others. It's somehow in relationship to others that we develop arrogance. That might be the arrogance of thinking that we're better than those that are actually equal than we are, in like just some because of some slight difference, or the arrogance of being just slightly inferior to someone who's actually really much higher in standing, or whatever the comparison is about. So that was when we were talking about arrogance. There are these different ways of being arrogant, but that is independent on comparison to someone else. While self-infatuation can is just about oneself. It's not in comparison to someone else, but just by getting attached to one's own qualities and liking and really being infatuated or developing haughtiness because of these qualities that one thinks one has. So I'm healthy and strong, and to think that I'm like to develop a self-infatuation based on thinking I have a good education, I have all the wealth, I'm very good looking. All of these kinds of thoughts and statements that are self-infatuation, being attached and liking oneself and one's own qualities so much. So yes, the difference here between arrogance and self-infatuation is whether it's in comparison to someone else or just by oneself. And self-infatuation here is said to be the support for disturbing emotions and subsidiary disturbing emotions. So it lies the basis for these afflictions and the subsidiary afflictions. The next subsidiary disturbing emotion is then the lack of faith. lack of faith belongs to the category of delusion. It is not to be interested in what is true and virtuous. It forms the support for laziness. So what is meant here with that which is true and virtuous? That's like the correct, the things that we should be interested in, the correct abodes of virtue and qualities, referring, for example, to the three jewels. So through a lack of faith, one is not interested in the three jewels and the qualities that they entail. And so one doesn't, without faith in the three jewels, one will not endeavor to practice the Dharma with one's body, speech, and mind correctly. And so when we say, when we have this attitude that we're thinking, okay, it's really not okay if I don't practice the Dhamma correctly. It's absolutely necessary that I will now practice the Dhamma. That is an inclination towards the Dhamma that is an aspiring towards correct and authentic Dhamma practice. But a lack of that, because one does not have faith in the qualities of the Dhamma and Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the three jewels, is then this lack of faith. And it forms the basis for laziness, because then one won't engage in virtuous practice. So that also that leads us then to the next point, which is laziness. Laziness is to cling to unwholesome activities such as lying down, resting, or stretching out, and to procrastinate without taking delight in and engaging in what is virtuous. It is the opponent of diligence. So laziness then refers to not engaging in virtuous practice here. And aspects of that is when one just does whatever feels good right now without considering, without taking delight in virtuous practice, in Dhamma practice. So if one just lies around, or even in an assembly just stretches out the legs and looks for one's own physical contact, comfort, if one just sits around, doesn't do anything without a reason, then this is laziness, or just procrastinating on virtuous activity, not doing it now, putting it off for later, and just being lazy in the sense that one does not engage in anything virtuous. That is laziness. And so it means that one won't engage in any virtuous practice because one does not take delight in virtuous practice. So it's the opposite to diligence, which is the delight in virtue.
dang lelo dang chebe gyule kedi langdor la sop sur melembas doshagi ondula rona shedang timu tinde toksum kangi wangdul rona yang tila sapsap chene mechewa tine toksum ongla dronyengi mare samne tinde sene samlo matang war chene toksum ondo tangshana pagme drowas lelo namyeng do dinde lemna ya namyeng ondo tang choge mare sene tinde sene simla tapo majamne pa namyeng ondo tangshana pagme bas pagme badine toksum dang lelo tang san chebe gyules kewa dang kewa chokoge wa layang ani kewa tube nangme tang ne kewa jogo to matwa tikwa pangya dendola tikwa jogo pang matwa langdor dendola sosop sopar sur lembas sopasana sapsap de sur lembas na lamsang lemba to tinde sur melembas na nyomongbe ong de dogena lamsang nyomong ong de doshoge maresene de sapsam machani pha hyoyang jishana 아니 술 멜렘바스 로양 마치는 술 렘바스 술 멜렘바 바위비 미든 총대를 relag유레스 아니 미게와 디게 방미디에나 조 된가랑 좀 셈라티니 미게와 된도 패신 아니 개와데 공도 펠레라 집기유레스 레제노스 다 디체라양 쟁에스 템바체도에 주레스 쟁에데네 아니 개위 mikpa 미살거라 제바 디 템백이 미든 초 딘데레스 묘몽바당 총딩기 템바 찰와 심잉비 땡치레스 데스는치 개위 mikpa 미살와스 개와 개위 심 먼저 베나 개위 심 노차 베나 개위 심 베나조 셰당 메바 베나 개위 심 베나 상제추 겐든 콘조스물라 당도 이체게 대바 depena pagye ro lamdur la sapsapchiwa o tenzo chazang ani sheshin ro sheshin sing je ro she lü dang na tenzo ani chigla kanasna kewa chogla dang to wa dan sheshin ro o tenzo gewi mikpa tenzo la ten salbo mewas misalwas misalwas na gewi samlo tenzo kem hatune samlo naming do shon ane misalwa tenzo mingla dani chenge la gres di na langdur ginne meche ba na temba sing jero di temba gi mitun chong de cha de yus migun chong to gyurwis tadi nyomongba tenzo dang chungding gi nyamdula chung de re nyomongba tenzo zawi nyomongba tenzo da nyamdula chung ni de re zawi nyomongba nyamdo tete dang yus chenge sing de di dang temba 딱딱 대마도 파 젬바데 젬바 찰로스나 젬바 딱딱 젬비 간나 대마도네 디네 젬바 제바라고 차포 젬비 간나 대마도네 디네 삼로 심바 먹고 간나 땅도 와데 젬바 찰로스 셈 영예게 된 시도 지기레스 증에되기 다 시신 민바선 유몽바당 총바르 된바 영위 시랍데세 자위 유몽바된 조당 양관 냠들라 유스 조체와데 다데 영위 시랍데세 영와 기위 촉 있나양 딜라 아니 마죽네 메기위 촉라 파혈 전에 파 땅샤네와 영와 치샤와데 네 인위 시랍데스 고숨기 쥐어발라 시신도 미죽 바르스나 랑자케와 강임바 도자미케와 강임바 대시신도 아니 데라 랑자케와이나 추랑 미게와이나 파빵 된도 지tum나디 시신도와 대시신도 미죽 바르스나 미죽 바르 밥밥도 주바데 동화 중에 밥밥도 쓰데가다 제 삽삽 맞네 제 sem kanjumang jung yin bike chado jinsa jungpa te tungwa ham nyeba jungege ten cheba wo
The next subsidiary disturbing emotion is then heedlessness. Heedlessness is not to apply oneself earnestly and carefully to adopting virtue and abandoning evil deeds, and is due to the three poisons along with laziness. It is the opponent of conscientiousness, and its function is to increase non-virtue and to diminish virtue. So heedlessness or carelessness is based on the three poisons, so ignorance, attachment, aversion, and attachment and aversion. And so because of strong afflictive emotions together with laziness being not to care about implementing virtuous practice, so not being diligent in virtue, but being lazy and engaging in that which is not particularly virtuous. that is the basis for heedlessness, for not caring to implement virtue, to not have this conviction and this care that this care that one thinks, oh, I should not be doing non-virtue. I should not let any opportunity go to waste to practice virtue. I really need to practice virtue, and to be careful to at all times implement these principles of adopting and abandoning or avoiding. So not having those kinds of thought in mind is to be heedless, not caring about the correct implementation of adoption and avoidance. And that is based on these afflictive emotions and laziness. And so it's a direct opposition to conscientiousness, where one carefully implements these virtuous practices at all times, or the principles of what is to be adopted and what is to be avoided. So one, without caring, one will engage straight away in any kind of non-virtuous actions without even bothering to worry about it, without having this conviction in mind that one should not do it. And therefore, this carelessness, the heedlessness, is the very basis for engaging in many non-virtuous actions, for increasing one's non-virtue, and diminishing virtuous practice, because one just doesn't care, one does not take care to implement these the principles of what is to be adopted and what is to be avoided. This is then followed by forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is to be unclear and forget a virtuous objective. It is the erroneous mindfulness which accompanies a disturbing emotion and is the opponent of being mindful. It forms the support for distraction of mind. So forgetfulness refers to not remembering the instructions, on how to practice virtue. And especially this accompanies the afflictive, the disturbing emotions. When the disturbing emotions are strong, then one will not practice the instructions. One will forget the instructions on what to do and what not to do. So to forget the instructions is forgetfulness, the opposite to mindfulness or recollection. And so that then is an opposition of all the virtuous states of mind that we have seen. So one is not, one forgets the focus point, one forgets the objective of practicing virtue if the afflictive emotions are strong, and with that forgetfulness is rampant. Also, one forgets what one's intention to practice virtue, for example, is a virtuous intention as the object of determining mental states. One loses one's sense of conscience. One forgets one's mental state of faith that goes away, or one's carefulness, and also one's vigilance, one's vigilant introspection, which means to continuously check one's mind to avoid the coming into being of non-virtuous mental states, and to make sure that one practices or develops the virtue all time. So this is really the basis then for a distracted mind. Distraction of mind referring to being carried away by non-virtuous actions, because one does not remember to practice virtue. So it refers to the fact that one cannot remember, like this forgetfulness, that one doesn't remember the conducive circumstances and the conducive practices, but is distracted or turns the mind towards the opposite of that, and therefore it's the root for all afflictions. Then we have non-alertness, inattention. Non-alertness is the distracted discrimination accompanying a disturbing emotion. It results in hasty and mindless engagement in the actions of the three doors without alertness, and so forms the support for downfalls to occur. Here, alertness and is the same term as vigilant introspection. So alertness, not being alert, mainly is an aspect of being distracted too. So one is distracted, one does not remember the distinctions of non-virtue that one needs to be abandoning, and therefore one does not guard one's body, speech, and mind, and one does not check one's body, speech, and mind for virtuous actions to make sure they do not arise. And so because one forgets the instructions, one forgets these points, one forgets one's objective of practicing virtue, because one is distracted, then one is also not investigating, one is not practicing vigilant introspection or alertness, and therefore one gets carried away by the afflictive emotions easily and then engages in all sorts of actions with one's body, speech, and mind without checking those at all. And so one, without even noticing, might engage in a lot of severe downfalls.
Mukbanis, the Timugi Chartopas, Mukba Semjung Shebadini, Tanda Tuxungina Zo, Tine, Timugi Charla Topares, Zo Kanda Chungers, Lu Dan Semnebe, Jigotao, number Tauji, Lu Yangbo Meba, Lu Jigotao, Lu Nyoto, Semdian Be Tangma, and the Sem Jango in the Mewa Chan, Sem Chiwara, Nambes. Mikpala jig minu paras na pina ne je shine la so ba de komge na ya ta de la sem de jug minu wa ra sem de je wo chao sem thumdom ro cha de lü diang de je lü yang bo ro de me wa de cha ne shine de la jug minu wa pina thosam ro chi na thosam de la jug minu wa ro de ra nang du dui jing se na sem je ko chao cha ne su bu de Sem Jigo Tao Chane, Sem de Lopchung on the Dromato was Sem de Kan Shira, Samlo Chilola and Namyang Mayambache, the Nikua Maybache, Sem Yuto, Chane Buglajic Shira, Samia Mebaje Tome, de Rosero, and Subudian, the Nerji, Subo, Yangodo, Subo, Zochin Yavin, Dematon, Subudian, and Yoto Chate, all the teachings. Sem less to Miron Warazo, did you come that same day? Tell some last of it in Degi. Legala mirung said, the Chinani, Yumuba Timuk Lasso Padine Jake, ten chingres. The Copas thing, the Simjung de Conderson, Copat singing the Copas, and one say Copa Lasopa, two bits him, Jesu should be, Jesu should be, Doshaki chat of Paras. One say Copa Lasopas and then a Zego Lasopa, one Zego Lasopas, and one Zego Lasopas. Ngun sosu mi chambo den zonyam do la tsemo tsewa tang kema shorwa tang pachu kyam rowa tang mane sama saga chimba raw tang o tenzo ge semla yidong wa ge namba jiro wa o tenzo 제수 쇼비스 텐조 semla yang corner lojong chewi kabla ina dado samden tingye zen kombi kabla ina dado tenzo kabla au teze ge samlo tenzo ge dubi chema tenzo ge yido hongwa ge samlo tenzo ge yido hongwa ge di netul tenzo chenma netul tenzo ge ne digi jesu shobi tene samlo tenzo ram corner ngoma 강당 강 중연바 이동의 삼바 내가 강다 강주가 된돌 삼로 양양 코드는 도착이 차도가 조체와 된돌라 셈 가능 게 공도 똑바레스 율라 초베스는 셈데 디 율디도기 왕돌라로네 레수 미롱신 디디 갑델라 네 퇴삼라 소바기 아니 레갈라 룸투기 말에 셈데 마시와 도차네 셈데 디 고바 도차데라 마시버 집에 신에기 바로 제바워서 디 조체와데 심 아니 시와로 내라 바로 저기래 심 투부로 차네 바로 제바워서 되네 디치라 양 넘버 잉비 심중승이 줘레스 단 넘버 잉비 심중승인데 독숨거기 차독다우레 하람마도 된데 숨기도와 독숨기 차르독바 독숨기 차독바 심 율라 파 요네 심 율라 요네 참네 되네 개와 이스탄발라 제직도 민네바 엔텐데 체기레스 개와 베나 퇴바 삼바 콤발라소바 강기 왕도 셈 아니 민네바 체바데 센틸라 치당 난당 쳔마 엠와 나소바 치 베나 치룰데 엠와데 델와 나라타 율메 제수장와 센티네 소제오 아니 강리 야고도 강바 야고도 지신 낙살 야고도 소심진당 미당 모자당 다당 라소과 된저게 율리도 홍와 된저라 아니 심 된데스네 잉네 된저 야고도 삼네 된저라 데모망보 다 된저라 삼로 전장 망보 콜네 된데스네 아니 된데스 심 된저라 야고 시엔이 도나니 디 치로게 영와 데 수블라 영와 다는 신게 자 셰라 소바 루당 비왕당 된저게 자 님보 된저라 되네 자 계자 당 자단 된저라 님보 된저라 율 엠도나 대양 치루도 엠와스 다 치루도 율나라 엠와스 라이도 소자 아니 디 심보 사마 로 조아 심보 된저나 된저라 양 칼라 심보라 삼로 뭐다네 엠도와 칼라 지 되네 렉자 잠보 렉자 나서 받은데 엠와데레스 다 난기 엠와데 조데 대 징거 당 아니 로 엠와데레 샤고르 순수로와 징와스는 난기 엠와스디가라 베나 삼덴도 곰데나라도 양배자된데 딱이나라도 되네 징와스디가라 셈난나 테데 차네 셈데 살보메바 로좀 빼자 강나 양 삼로 야보 드라마도와 탭 강나 이게 최 강나 삼로 야보 드라마도와 삼로 된데 니 국교네 말에 니 국교 소로치니 북라 토메 차데나 디 칭와레스 그 고바스네데 사단 야강나 슈ጆ나 신레 오데데스니 드로나 디 난기 앵와 공도로 도기레스 또 로냥와스 디가라타 또양 띵인진데 갑라 lep기도와 로냥와스인데 계자데 지 이제 띵에 젠데라 답변나 다 검야고 잡투숨 삼내양 띵에 젠야고 검투숨 삼내 되니 수부 대오도 라고 삼내 셈hlö보 중송 라고 삼내 아니 데스네 된줄라양 삼로 양양 땅내도나 셈hlö보 차송 수부 대오도 검야고 레송 라도 망보 지네 데스 삼나 띵에 젠 된줄게 로당 도와된들 용조 된조양 남게 남양 레스 숨마레 다 체미 영화성인데 작도 되니 제 깨라 침보당 명 침보당 톱 권해 침보당 오던데 된돌라 ing송나 로와 네 디양양 영화에 송송하데 체미 영화 작도 소 깨라 소 된돌라 영화 되니 진능 장능 된족이 영화 지 증명 장능 되게 명충도 도기데 톱고사 충도 도기데스 되게 삼로 되게 코나양 세메앵와 되니 디치라 양 앵와 시바양 나당 나이르 짐바스 나오 나이 나바오 나이 강바오 나이 캄바오 나이 조고 나이 조모 네 mai punche nyen nye de lo de ne mambo samna den zo engwa re sin sunga re de ne xin yang de ne engwa den zo rang dun yi che sin rang dun yi che de ne bena zo che wa so so yi tun da la samla ko ne de ne te pa me ba ge samla ba den zo engwa kong do la sha re sun de ne rang xin ge engwa de rang xin ge engwa de la ya na kong e nam she ge 다는 수다 티로를 잘 ni chö den to tham jale engwa la so ba den de ge engwa la e wa den de years engwa la e na o den des ni mambo chi ni sha yures ni la bi ke da chi da nam so ge e wa yö to
The next of the secondary afflictions, disturbing emotions, is then lethargy. Lethargy belongs to the category of delusion. It means to be withdrawn, mentally incapable, and able to focus on an object because of heaviness of body and mind. It forms the support for the disturbing emotions. So lethargy is really an aspect of ignorance or delusion. And it refers to the state where body and mind are very heavy. The body is heavy, sluggish, tired, and the mind is unclear. It's also this kind of dull, unclear state of mind. It's not agile and clear and ready to engage, but this dull kind of state. It's an obstacle to one's shamatha meditation, to one's shine practice, calm abiding practice. It's a dull state of mind where one is not asleep, but also not alert, not aware, but dull and heavy and sluggish, where one can't really focus on anything properly. So it's not a distracted state, not an outwardly distracted state, but it's an obstacle to one's study, reflection, or meditation because of such heaviness and dullness. For example, when we are physically tired and the body feels sluggish and without energy, then also the mind becomes very dull, very sluggish, and we're not able to study properly. It's not to be asleep, but to be sleepy, to be the state before one falls asleep. We're tired and sluggish, both in body and mind. That refers to lethargy. And since it doesn't allow one to develop the qualities of listening and contemplation, then it falls into the category of ignorance. Its opposite is then excitement. Excitement is the fascination with an attractive object and belongs to the category of desire. It is a mental incapacity due to the mind moving towards an object, and it causes restlessness. It is a hindrance to calm abiding. What I didn't say in the previous one with lethargy is that one cannot practice probably, one cannot develop the qualities of listening and reflection in this state, and therefore with no discrimination and so on, one will engage, or it forms a support for disturbing emotions. Excitement then means to be excited, agitated because of different kinds of object. the people that we're close to, that to always think about our interactions with other people, with doing certain activities, being excited and contemplating all the time about what we want to do or what we did in the past, whether we were laughing with these people and joking around, traveling, or just going on some outings with people. When we think again about those experiences, then this really takes our mind away from one-pointed virtuous practice. We won't be able to, like, it agitates us, and we like it. It's mainly a joyful state where we're so excited about the cool things, the amazing things that we do and did and will do, that we're so agitated by these things. We're so much thinking about those things that our mind is not pliable, and we cannot focus the mind one pointedly in our meditative practice. And so it's a big obstacle for shamatha meditation or calm abiding meditation. And the next point then is distraction. Distraction belongs to the categories of the three poisons. It is the mental emotion or wandering towards an object which causes the inability to remain one-pointedly on a virtuous objective. It can be defined as distraction towards the outer, the inner, and towards status. So distraction is really a part of all afflictive emotions, because it takes our mind away from a virtuous aim, from a virtuous focus, and has the mind be distracted by all sorts of objects. And therefore, one will not engage in the virtuous activities of studying, reflection, and meditation. So it takes one away from developing the qualities of study, reflection, and meditation. And there are different kinds of distractions that are enumerated here. The commentary even gives a few more types of distractions than are mentioned here. So there's outer, inner, and distraction towards status or characteristics. And the way that these are explained is that outer distractions referring to being distracted to the sense objects, to objects. For example, being distracted by looking at beautiful forms, beautiful sceneries, seeing the beautiful mountains, and the senses will be distracted. Will focus on those, and the mind is distracted by the appearance of these beautiful objects, the beautiful mountains, or forests and flowers and so on, or the animals and the people around, how beautiful they are, how beautiful this is. Being distracted by cars that are really amazing to look at. So being distracted by the visual objects, for example, by what one sees, is one of the outer distractions. But this applies to all of the sense organs or the sense experiences. So being distracted by sound would be losing one's focus on virtue, because one hears the beautiful music, like flute player playing the flute, or guitar sound, these kinds of sounds, like beautiful sounds, something that the mind attaches itself to and gets distracted by, or any kind of sound. So it's just the outer objects that distract our minds towards them. And the same then holds true for the other sense objects. There's something that smells really nice, and suddenly we're focusing on that instead of our object of meditation or our object of study, reflection, meditation, whichever one it is. Same with a taste or something that we feel. All the sense organs are similarly, or the sense experiences can function as distraction equally. Then inner distraction refers to, first of all, dullness and agitation, just as we have seen. So when we cannot focus on the virtuous activity because our mind is particularly dull, sleepy, sluggish, then that keeps us from engaging in meditation or study, right? And therefore, that's distracting, an inner distraction. We can't think clearly. We cannot focus clearly when we're about to fall asleep. So due to the sluggishness or the sleepiness, then we will not be able to focus and just get distracted by a thoughtless, dull state, or with agitated by thoughts, just as we have described in the previous disturbing mental state. There's also the experience of the taste of one's meditation, which can be a distraction in itself. So when we meditate and things go well, for example, and we then think, oh, my meditation is going so well. I physically feel so good right now. I don't have any aches. This meditation makes me feel great. Also, my mind so calm, such a enjoyable state of mind. Those kinds of inner commentaries and thoughts with regard to the practice, the meditative practice itself, are a distraction of the taste of the meditation. So as soon as one experiences something, having an inner commentary about it, that's a distraction. Then what it means here, it says then in the text, it says towards status. That means to think a lot about how to acquire name, fame, status, and so on. Or being afraid, like having a state of terror or fear to lose one's name, fame, status, and so on. So those are then the distractions towards status. And then there are also distractions of I and mine, grasping to self and that which belongs to the self. So thinking a lot about, this is me, and these are my friends, this is my family, and thinking about them, thinking about everyone who's related to one, who's in one circle of acquaintances and so on. So being distracted by what one identifies as I and mine. That's a type of distraction. Or when one practices the Mahayana, to be distracted by suddenly focusing mainly on oneself. So to develop more an attitude of the fundamental vehicle rather than the Mahayana attitude. So one can be distracted by focusing more on one's own benefit rather than the vast motivation of the Mahayana. That's also a distraction. And so in this way, one can be distracted by all sorts of phenomena very naturally, all kinds of characteristics and so on. So there are so many different ways to categorize or to identify distractions. And so here we just mentioned a few that fall into this category of the mind wandering off towards some other object rather than staying one-pointedly on the virtuous objective.
대달 니슈니 zan윤제 차르 복싱 대단 예외 아니 년윤스나 년윤 니슈스 년윤 니슈스 다 자비 녀몽 덴조기 아니 콩수 똑대외 아니 데라 예외 녀몽스 zawi nyumong denzo tang ane zawi nyumong de tang rao shukchimbo mena yang khunzo rao yoba zawi nyumong pena zawi nyumong doshak yo na zawi nyumong nyamdo la tanda semjung gopa singde gopa laginde pena di nyamdo legin rao ga ane ji zawi nyumong doshak singde yosong na pena gyonor la sem dochakwa yobe tenne ne serna singde leben rao rao ane 다음은 신게 되네 공도 냠도 라양 ane di nyumong ba pena zawi nyumong kongdo nyamdo la yang ante nyenyen nishu nane kongdo ki kongso tokwa tenzo ante nyamdo la tenjikdo ane lebe yo ba tang halam mato kongdo tang dawu halam mato marikpa tang dawu halam mato tene docha tang dawu tende cho tang tunbe o tende jumsen tenzo la tene kongso ki mingla nyewi nyumong sine lapshaba re sumare 대다른 니슈네 잔윤제 차르도신 대당 예외나 예외 뉴몬 셰자고 산티니 진영 다 들완낭라 양답에나 네 모참메바당 첼메바라게 대다 심중낭라 모참메바당 첼메바라 니도 디데 베나 미기와 같이 요체메세 탐제게 냠둘라 예스 충분된 대여스 되는 순간에도 네 대바 메바 라야당 마데바 당 렐로 당 바메바 당 쟁에 라겐다 네디 남영 당 아니 셰럽 찰와 된존이 아니 셈 탐제 냠둘라 예스 냠과 된존 냠둘라 아니 양 아니 베나 초와 라겐직 당 콘징 당 아니 직바 사와 라야데 당 차도 당 넘버 세와라야 되더니 공독의 공수 똑바라 인스 단다 자위 nyumong la 오늘 심부터는 자위 nyumong 공독의 공도라 인스 수모레도 양 세르나 당 아니 랑김진도 제네드는 연된 남바 균으로 퇴산 나서바 여 삼비 짝바데 당 되는 고바스나 되니 뭔지 이동 같은 저 삼로 된저 양양 코네로 된저 고바 된저네 도착이 차도라 공도라 예스는 되는 순간에도 소소 념바 당 예바 된저 견된저 연나양 배샤와 차바당 되네 교와 당 요주 안에 목바 된저 탐제 때목이 공술라 또가 예스는 순간에도 네 시야 쟁에당 남영당 셰랍 찰바데 양 티모기 공도라니 또가 예스니 다든저 들어가는 숨들어 된저 다데 직티 카너스나 고 잔윤기 뇨라 요베기 다 도당 다오지 된제 어딘데 콜라 제도스
These 20 belong to the categories of the root disturbing emotions. Because of being associated with them, they're called subsidiary disturbing emotions. So these 20 subsidiary disturbing emotions, they are based on and they're very close to the presentation of the 6 root disturbing emotions. They're subsidiary or aspects of those. So they're very close, or they belong to the category of these root reflective emotions, and are mainly really parts of them, or are very close to their presentation. They're very connected to these root reflective emotions. For example, this agitation and this excitement that we saw, that is based on and connected to the attachment to these experiences and objects. And because of the attachment, then one is the mind is agitated by remembering them all the time, again and again. And so in this way, that belongs to desire attachment, as it falls. It's a secondary kind of affliction that belongs to desire attachment, or is related to desire attachment, as well as in the same way that for example, stinginess is also being stingy with one's own wealth and possessions, not being able to part from them. That's also an aspect of attachment, being attached to one's own wealth and possessions. Or envy being an aspect that is connected to aversion. Aversion is seeing that someone else has something that one wants oneself, and having aggression towards that person, anger towards that person, or aversion to other people having what one wants for oneself. So mainly we need to understand that these subsidiary afflictive emotions are related to a high degree to the primary, to the root afflictive emotions, to the root disturbing emotions. And so that's why we categorize them in this way. The root, or the basic afflictive emotions, and then the subsidiaries that are related to these primary ones. And the way this is explained also in the commentary, or is broken down a little bit in the commentary, is that a lack of conscience and shamelessness, these two, they are subsidiary disturbing emotions that accompany all non-virtuous actions, all non-virtue. Then lack of faith, laziness, heedlessness, forgetfulness, and distraction, and also mistaken knowledge. They are mistaken wisdom. They are all aspects. They are accompanying, or they are concurrent with all afflicted states of mind, afflictive minds. Then the other ones are that, so these ones, lack of faith, laziness, heedlessness, forgetfulness, and distraction, they go along with all afflictive states. While then fury, resentment, spite, envy, hostility, these are specifically related to anger, to the root disturbing emotion of where is it? The root disturbing emotion of anger, or anger aversion. Then stinginess, self-infatuation, and excitement. These are all aspects of attachment, desire attachment, because they have to do with the desire and the attachment to certain things. Concealment, hypocrisy, pretense, and lethargy are related to the afflictive emotion, root affliction of ignorance or delusion, and again shamelessness and or lack of conscience, shamelessness, lack of faith, and laziness. They belong to like they are very related to actually carelessness. And then also forgetfulness, distraction, mistaken discernment. These fall into the category of delusion. So this is a way that the commentary breaks them down. If you didn't get all of these, I will give them to you in writing, how the commentary breaks them down. So this also leads to the question for today for the attendance. What is Inka going to provide you with? Because it might be too quick. Yes. Awesome.
Shenjur shile nine nige jula tene ke mige gang yim memba tenzo dang kayang ewa chi matova nila tene ane digba dang matikpa chawa di china digire dawa di china digi mare samba dawa dang tuche gang yin min soge namye meba tende chado gres nidi shormani nidi kuna ane diru kamla mige sheba nayi sheba che sheba lugi sheba 공의 셰바 탐제 낭도 듄이 아니 칠로라 셰바든도 칠로 율람 하트로바지는 낭라 뒤바르 체메 소체와 데데 녀몽바 띠무기 자 차라 똑바레스 니들 랩송나 데네 퇴삼 라소바기 된데게 자와 된도 탐제 쇼르기레스 자와 야고 지투기 말에 니 원무가 송네 아니 자와 쇼르게 된 제바오스 다 여바싱인 줄요 여바싱 교바스와데 심중되니 응아르 제발라 이미가 남베세 모마게 내가 제샤바 된도라 되네 이제 셈 마가네 되네 마가네 셈 마가네 제 남베 예라마 이제 짝짝 당선에 예라마 짝짝 당선나 예라 안에 가르스나 야 문제죠 내가 된전에 무튼이 도로 맞추니 제다 참 제샤교서로 일라 차바스 셈네비 바르도 줘봐스 셈네비 바르도 줘봤으나 셈네비 바르도 줘봤으나 다 문다 랑게 자와 강 체계나 디 강라네라 바르도 줘봐스 똑바 세운데 가르스나 율라 셈 삼바당 율라 실 셰발라 때네 삼바당 셰랍라 때네 미비 ngopo kundu 출위 얘기 줘봐대 미비 ngopo세 율된도라 소속의 삼로 당사의 율 분바라고 된도라 율 분바 가와라고 ngopo 된도라 kundu 출위 얘기 줘봐대 셈게다 바 삼도네 다 kundu 출와 얘기 줘봤어 율된도 당 율가와 분바라서 발라 되네 삼데도네 kundu 출위 저 얘기 삼조해라 이렇게 잘 얘기 줘봤대 얘기 줘봤대 된 올지 점 짐바 증명 넘버 젠스 된 올지 점 분바라고 까와라고 된조 탐제 분바당 까와 인반이도 탁초시라 메네 올지 점다 할람 분바 인사래서 할람 kawa indro halam pagide depde insare halam de chala de dinde insare do samsam do olchi jam jimba jingbi namba de de pumba in min do takcha shibu matang ne rob jam jimba la jingbi nambas pecha shana jangrungbe sogla 자동사게 포르와 인남 양나 분바 인남 세네된데 케바리 셰라 하체 바르체네 안에 다가 점나 징바세 짐바다고 오세 네 쩌바네 양 율라 셈바당 셰랍게 셰비고네 율라 아텐데 된디 케바르 소소르 똑비 얘기 시네 숭와 시비 넘바친데 디디양 제 레레 제니 에바친이 스미에데 레도와데 봄바 사르파 제두당 제미도 디 게두당 게미도 차고 레도당 마차과 레도 차도당 차미도 디네 쇼미도당 쇼미도 스네데 제니 삽삽 제니 아니 디기 제 케바르 소소르 똑바세 pumbagi towa shibdu dan shimidu, pumbagi chuto kante du midu, pumba ip kante du midu, pumba di gyubcha yako redu dan remidu dang, tende sina chopa la gire, di simjung simba digi mingla, tende takta yako chikingi sim digi mingla, chopa sina gire, simjung digi chopa. Ne, chopa gos, naso.
Now we come to the 4 variables. And it starts with sleep. Sleep causes the consciousnesses of the 5 sense doors to be withdrawn inwardly without any discrimination as to what is virtuous or unvirtuous, appropriate or inappropriate, or timely or untimely. It belongs to the category of delusion and forms the support for losing activities. So the first of the variable mental states is sleep. And when we are asleep, then the sense faculty, the sense consciousnesses are withdrawn. We don't look at anything, we're not smelling anything, we're not hearing anything. All of this is withdrawn inwardly without focusing on the object. And there's no discrimination happening with regard to what should be done, what should not be done. It's a state that is withdrawn completely inwardly, and where none such discrimination happens. What is virtuous, what is non-virtuous, what is appropriate, inappropriate, what should be done right now, what should not be done right now. All of these discernments are not present when we are asleep. So in that sense, sleep is an aspect of delusion because it's not clear about these things. And there's no activity happening. We're not actually engaging in any active action. Regret involves sadness because of mental displeasure with a former action. It obstructs resting the mind. The second of the 4 variables is regret. And regret means that one doesn't want to, like that one regrets a former action. So one looks back at an activity that one has engaged in previously and recognizes that one doesn't want to do that anymore. That this, then one develops aversion against what one has done before, and that interrupts then the action that one is currently doing. Like one will not continue doing the same action that one has discerned now as being something bad. So one develops regret of one about what one has done and will not continuously do that action or not do this action again. And but in that way, it's also disturbing. It prevents the mind from continuously staying with the same activity. And so it disturbs the mind in the sense that it does not let the mind rest in one thing. Conception is a mental expression created by the mind's investigation of an observed object by means of apprehension and discrimination. It is merely grasping a rough meaning, and it has a coarse form, just like perceiving a distant form without distinguishing whether it is a clay ball or a vase. So conception here then refers to a rough understanding, like a rough contact with the object of one's discernment. So the entity which one focuses upon is not clear, is not fairly discerned, but because just through one's apprehension and discrimination, one has a rough idea of it. So if one sees a pillar or a vase, then one thinks, oh, most likely this is a vase. Most likely this is a vase. Looks like a vase. So the distinction is not so clear. The discrimination is not clear. It's a mental a rough mental engagement with that object. Just so it's a mental activity, mental behavior, this conception where the object is not recognized clearly yet, but we have like a rough idea what it might be. Like when we see a vase from afar and we think, yeah, maybe most likely that's a vase, but we haven't developed certainty about that object. So it could be a vase, it could be a bowl, but we think maybe it's a vase, that kind of situation. So to have a rough understanding, coarse kind of understanding of the object. And then clearer than conception is then discernment. Discernment is the action of the mind examining and taking hold of an object and is capable of distinguishing the attributes of an object by means of apprehension and discrimination. It has a fine form like distinguishing whether the vase is new or not. So discernment then really recognizes that object of one's cognition and really discerns it in all its particularities, with all its features. So it goes through with discernment, all the qualities of the object will be analyzed, will be discerned. Is the vase new or old? Is the vase broken or whole? Does it have a little split or not? It will, whatever we want to put into it, fit in it or not? So one goes through each and every particularity and feature of that object of one's observance and discerns it correctly and precisely, even the more subtle details of it. And so that's what is meant with really distinguishing the fine forms, or being the fine forms, distinguishing whether the vase is new and so on. So it's the examination of the object in detail.
Tenam kulong dang sambi keparaki di shibude ane ta di shibudi korla tene di shibudi lewa dang tene sosoge ta ti tawji samla dang godu sambe kulong dang di taw samla dang godu samba dang samba di taw samla dang ni gone tene ge sambe keparaki 개완이 도 유튜브와 대반이 도 유로와 루마텐이 도 유로와 지리퍼 나 유튜브에 배나디 시민 신주르시 신수 신당 신도 유튜브에 배나 신주르시 시자고.
Since these can be changed into any kind of virtuous, negative, or neutral form by the different attitudes or interests, they're called the four variables. So these four, whether they are virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral, depends entirely on the different motivations and inclinations that one might have when when being under those in these states. So if one is motivated and if one has a good motivation, and these can become positive and so on. So they are variable in the sense that the motivation with which one engages in those changes.
심중 단다 맞중마치 대다 네 조sem게 코드 드레 덴주명나 sem게 상망보스네 나고요스 아니 개와 당 딕바 셈중기 개발 개디기 원이라 단다두루 조 에와 지당데 딘데 삼로 코나 개와레 딘데 삼로 코나 미개와레 스네 개디게 삼로 왕게 개발게 아니 에와 조 딘데스니 에와 지와인스 디 마세비 지당 셈중생인데라 신양 삼로 당 두셰 아니 진당 댕기 개발라 때네 셈교기도 셈교기미도 셈라 깔레 침보도 셈라 깔레미도 kale duwa samthan ro kale midwa sam tadi keje de soba komgo san meang dis soba komi me lai ro ta nga dogo nga tego nge keje di lapko la so pa shindu mangbo gyurwa imba de ha go go yores tanda duru zo kedi ki kola wangge ewa chewa zamji yin ro sung re de nam ni semdang chungding ge duje da de chungden sna khasan ya gang la shuare chung den se chung ba nga dang den be gone zo sem dang an de sem jung den do chung ba nga dang den be gone mi ba yul de chung gi yo se kung do tham je ge yul de mi ba yul wang bo de chung gi yo se chang mai pina mi ge she ba zo sem yin na 아니 semjung meki shebagi kodula yobe semjung denzo ge ani tende wangbo chunggyore meki sungjagi yulde dang semjung ge yulni de chunggyore wangbo chung tene ten wangbo chung tene namba jindang chung 제르르 chung 두 다다와 chung tende chungba tende ge chungding ge chebe gone tene chungding ge duje sene yesu maredo
With these mental states are mainly stated the distinctions of the general mind bases and the virtuous and negative mental states. It should be understood, however, that there are a tremendous number of different kinds, such as sadness and elation, difficulty and ease, patience and impatience, and so forth, which result from the different kinds of grasping patterns or apprehension, perception, and so on. So we spoke now about the 51 mental states, and we said that these are concurrent with the main minds. And the main distinction that we made here were into whether the mental states are virtuous or non-virtuous. So that was one of the main distinctions that we made, how we classified them and how we divided them. And so when we develop these kinds of mental states, whether this is a virtuous state of mind or a non-virtuous state of mind, that's where the basis on which we have divided all these mental states. Is it something virtuous or non-virtuous? Is a mental state like that bringing virtuous activity or motivates virtue, or does it not motivate virtue? But a different way of classifying could also be whether they, if they arise, whether they bring actually joy or suffering to the mind, whether they're pleasurable or not, or whether they are something positive or not positive, whether there's patience or no patience, whether they create difficulties for the mind or not, strenuous or not. There are many different ways that they can be classified, and that many different categorizations that one could take with regard to the mental states. Here, our distinction was made on whether they are virtuous or non-virtuous. And the main point is that they are all that they arise along with the main mind, with the what we identify as the main mind. So that the mental states that arise together with the main mind, and therefore they're concurrent with the main mind, in 5 aspects, the 5 points in which they are concurrent with the main mind. They focus on the same object. They depend on the same faculty. They apprehend, or they have as their object the same appearance, the same aspects, the same substantiality, the same fabrics, and so on, substances. And it happens at the same time. All of these are the same for the main mind and each of these mental states when they're concurrent, when they arise together with the main mind. So in that sense, we call them the concurrent formations, the mental states that are concurrent with the main mind. So we'll stop here for today, and please recite the dedication and the aspiration prayers together with us.
Chambala Bawe Chidara Kemba Dang Gundo Sambyo Deyang Deshen De Teta Kunye Chesu Dalo Chi Kewa Deta Tamje Rabdu Mu Dusum Shekpe Jalwa Tamje Ji Nowa Kangla Chondo Ngapa De Dagi Kebe Sawa Yende Gwen Yang Sambo Cheshire Rabdu Ngowara Ye Sunam Deye Tamje Sepa Ni Tomne Nyebe Chanam Pamje Ni Jega Nache Balaba Choba Yi Sebe Chole Jowa Jolowara Shong Kewa Din Jiwo Kun Sonam Yishe Chozo Shin Sonam Yishe Le Jongwa Tamba Kunye Toba Sho Lo Chu So Jolowara Chinye Labdo Solo Che Lamdo Jowara Chinye Labdo Solo Lam Chulwa Senwara Chinye Labdo Solo Chulwa Yeshe So Sharwara Chinye Labdo Solo Naso Chela Jain
Lucinang ani sa lakpala jeyong.
Sana kola charyong
Sa kibutang ranang.
Tunche
So Lamala is gonna have some fun.